Welcome to 5 on the Go, the ultimate career development podcast, created for students learning to uncover their career paths. In this episode, our guest, Zahra, helps us to learn about looking at the glass half full versus half empty, transitioning from academic settings to the professional workplace, efforts to break the glass ceiling, and having your voice heard at the corporate table. This is 5 on the Go, where your career journey never stops, and neither do we. Welcome to another episode of 5 on the Go, where we have the opportunity to connect with alumni from the University of Toronto who are here to talk about their career experiences, things that they've learned while they've graduated from University of Toronto and moved on to their professional experiences. Today, we're going to be interviewing an alumni by the name of Zahra, who graduated from the University of Toronto Mississauga. Zahra is going to be talking to us about transitioning into the professional workplace, the fear of failure, how to overcome pessimism, and most importantly, breaking the ceiling as a woman. So for this episode, welcome, and we look forward to meeting Zahra. Thank you so much for being here today. Thanks a lot for always coming back and helping our students out. Welcome. Can you tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jason, for having me. Always a pleasure to be here. My name is Zahra. I graduated from University of Toronto, Mississauga back in 2019 with a strong focus on molecular biology and a major in chemistry. I really enjoyed the sciences, and I'm currently working as a project manager at the Hospital for Sick Children.
Awesome. All right. Well, Zahra, welcome back. And, one of the things I think we probably want to learn from you today is the transition from the comforts of academia, being able to sit in a classroom, learn, be able to take on different opportunities while transitioning into the workplace. Can you talk to us about how you got to where you're at today?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times from the outside, it looks very perfect and it seems like everything kind of pieced together, but that's definitely not the case. There's been a lot of milestones and a lot of sleepless nights in between that kind of drove me to where I am today and continues to drive me forward. So I think with myself, I started off in academics with a strong focus in life sciences. I was very, very, very interested in going into dental school,
Right.
Which is one of the top programs, I would say, for most science kids. So just staying on top of my academics, maintaining a very strong extracurricular / academic background, or balance, I would say, making sure that I'm able to not only maintain my GPA, but also include some job shadowing opportunities in between so that I can meet the prerequisites and better position me as a stronger candidate for dental school. So I did that for first year, second year, third year, fourth year. When the time came to applying to grad schools and dental schools, I did that as my plan A. But I just had a feeling that I should probably prepare for a plan B and a plan C just in case. And so my plan B at the time was preparing for master's programs. So a lot of course-based masters, just because that was something I was more interested in as opposed to the thesis-based ones. And then from there, I had a plan C, and my plan C was applying for jobs and just giving interviews here and there just in case everything else does not work out. So I did that, and I actually ended up hearing from one of the interviewers that I'd applied for. They'd reached out and said, we just want to see, what would it be like to have you on our team? Mm-hmm. And this was a job at Sick Kids. And so I went ahead, did the interview just for fun. And I realized that, this is actually a very interesting role. It's something that I really enjoy, and it could potentially help me if I wanted to go back to dental school. So why don't I explore this a little? I went ahead and did the interview, and a lot of my focus, a lot of the focus the interviewers had was geared towards not only my academics, but also how I was maintaining and balancing the academics versus the extracurriculars I had on my plate at the time, and that really strengthened my interview during that time. So I did that. The interview went well. They offered me a job, and I decided, you know what, let's put a pause on dental school. Let's try this out. And that's kind of what kickstarted the whole thing. I went ahead, I started working, and I realized let's pause dental school for a bit longer. Year after year, I entertain the same thoughts. And it's been 4 years now, and I've transitioned from a research role to a clinical role towards the IT side and now towards the corporate side.
Wow.
So I've got a good mix of all the areas of the hospital. And I've learned over time that, whatever I learned during my academics and university, they didn't go to waste. They'd actually strengthened me and better positioned me to grow in my career. And so now everything I've learned in the science side of the house, I'm actually applying on the corporate side of the hospital.
Oh.
And I really enjoy it.
That is awesome. You mentioned something really interesting. So I just want to go back to that and just touch upon it. You talked about educational balance, and how you balance that was through extracurriculars, maybe doing things on the side. How did those help you in preparation for the last 4 years of moving into research, getting into project management, and now sort of bigger and better things? Can you touch upon that a little bit as well?
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I think, especially for students, when you're doing your undergrad and you're focused on your academics, you're focused on maintaining your GPA, making sure it's the highest GPA in the program, and at least at the bare minimum passing the exam so that you can, do well. And I think that was great, but that definitely requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of effort. It requires a lot of focus. And that cuts down the time, the effort, the focus, the attention you can give to your extracurriculars. So naturally, for a lot of students, finding opportunities on campus are probably ideal just because, it's closer. Time commitment is, you have some flexibility there.
Right.
You don't need to worry about, how am I going to balance this outside of my academic schedule? And that worked well. That worked great. But I actually met a mentor during the end of my second year or early third year of my university, my undergrad degree. And one of the things they mentioned to me was, you're preparing for dental school, and so are, maybe 50 other students in your program. And, you're also doing well academically, but you're trying to create this balance on the extracurricular side. You're doing your job shadowing, you're involved in student clubs, you're involved in athletics and sports clubs. That's great, but so are these other 50 kids. What makes you stand out?
Right.
And that left a huge impression on me. I was thinking about that for hours and trying to think okay, what can I do that makes me stand out as a candidate and strengthens my application in dental school? And so I think one of the things that I was thinking of was okay, maybe I can start thinking of opportunities outside of campus. How do I get involved? Where do I start? What do I do? How do I find the time and the effort to commit towards that? Yeah. And at the time, I remember there was, there were a lot of incidents that were happening around. I think one of the things I was interested in was learning self-defense. Just I walk alone at night. What can I do to keep myself safe? So I said maybe that's a good place to start. Maybe I can find a class that they're teaching women how to have self-defense skills. And there were some things on campus. I tried that out, but then I thought, okay, why not see if other girls are interested. And maybe if they are, we can find something off campus, that's a bit more central to everyone's homes. So we went to a local community center. We started a small we had an instructor that came in and taught self-defense to a bunch of girls. And that kicked off. It started off as 5 or 6 classes, and it became a 3-program series sort of course almost.
Wow.
And transitioned from self-defense to boxing classes. So I did that. I really enjoyed it. And I realized through that journey that, it was so fun that I got to participate, but I also enjoyed organizing and coordinating and, collaborating and communicating with others in the community. And from there, I started, just kind of packing in my schedule with other opportunities. So not only was I doing things that I enjoyed doing, but I was doing things that were helping other people around me as well. Okay. And this was in tandem to my academics and, the extracurriculars I had on campus. So it was purely just, out of genuine curiosity and genuine, I was passionate about it, which is why I pursued that and created these opportunities in the community. And, when I came to my 4th year, I still continued that. And when I was interviewing and writing out these grad applications and submitting them, I realized that every time an interviewer would come back and, ask me questions, they would focus and hone in on these extracurriculars I had outside of campus.
Right.
And I had some difficulty trying to understand why. And I realized through that conversation a few times that it wasn't a matter of, oh, you did this. It was a matter of not only did you do this, what did you learn from there? Because that is the outside experience that you'd gain. Every student is coming in from their undergrad. They're doing their academics. They're balancing it out with extracurriculars on campus and off campus. They have, some students may have part-time jobs or full-time jobs outside of that too. But the fact that you not only had that, but you included this too into that, what did you learn from it and how did you leverage that moving forward was where they were focusing in on. And I realized that I did it. Like I didn't realize I did it, but it took me a while to process that I did do it. And it was a matter of just kind of understanding how do I communicate that across and how do I leverage that skill that I had gained into the next opportunity that's coming up. So, yeah.
That's really interesting. I speak to many employers based on the role that I play here at University of Toronto Mississauga's Career Center, and I always hear that. We have employers consistently coming back to connect with our students at the University of Toronto. But one of the most important things I hear from them is we come back because we know what the students are learning in the classroom. We want to learn what that student has done outside of the classroom. Thanks a lot for, vouching the importance of that, because that's super important for all of our listeners. And hopefully they pick up on that as well and take that as they move forward. The fear of failure, Zahra, is real. And uncertainty clouds our judgment, and it's challenging to look at the glass half full. Rather, I think it's comfortable to look at the glass half empty. What advice do you have for students to move from pessimism to optimism? And how would you go about changing the mind or perspective of somebody who's in that state?
This is a very interesting question. I think for me, my biggest fear, so usually when you ask a person what your biggest fear is, it's probably going to be something like, I'm scared of heights. I'm
Right.
scared of my mom. I'm scared of, running around in the dark. My biggest fear is the fear of failure.
Right.
And that's been my fear since as early as I can remember.
Right.
And the only reason I was able to move forward was because my parents would nudge me a little and give me that support of, hey, if anything happens, you can always fall back. So I was privileged enough to have that driving force. But once you become a bit more independent, your parents are not always going to be there. And you need to get to a point where you feel comfortable to challenge yourself. You need to address that head on. You need to be straightforward and drive into it and say, okay, you know what? Yes, I may fail, but what happens if I don't fail? Right? There's a 50-50 chance.
Right.
And so I think, throughout my academic career, like from first year university until my fourth year of university, that's always been my mindset. What happens if I don't make it, right? And that really held me back a lot. And in fourth year, I realized, you know what? I need to hit this head on. And I went ahead and I applied to dental schools. I went ahead and I had a plan B of applying to grad schools. And then I went ahead and, did job interviews because of that. And the outcome of that was pretty positive. I ended up getting a job that not only did I interview for, the interviewer came back and created a new role for me because of that. So it was not only what I expected, but even better than what I'd expected at the time. And that's kind of where I felt a bit more confident in that, you know what, you need to start addressing these fears. You're going to fail, but if you do fail, at least you've tried it and you've learned something through it. And so, yeah, ever since then, ever since I started working, there's been a lot of opportunities where, it's always like you're going into this unknown sort of situation. There's always a lot of unknowns. You're not sure how are you going to navigate a lot of these challenges that you may encounter. How are you going to overcome them? What are you going to do? Even professionally, like there's going to be a lot of opportunities where you need to get things done. And there's a lot of people who have a lot more experience than you as well. And you're probably the youngest person or the inexperienced person in the room, but you do bring some sort of value, which is why you're in that room in the first place. So just kind of taking on that lens of, you know what, yes, I may be inexperienced, I may not know how to do things, but I can learn it, right? So switching that pessimistic lens into an optimistic lens is very important. I think things like even when it comes to not only the professional space, but even like volunteering or helping out, your day-to-day tasks even, there's going to be a lot of opportunities that you may feel are very mundane, are not as enthusiastic or not as new or, worth learning. But they do help contribute to the overall picture. They do help to strengthen certain skills that you may not know that you're lacking on.
Right.
So, just kind of leveraging every opportunity as a learning opportunity to grow yourself, not just personally, but also professionally. And it really helps. So just always keeping, just always being optimistic that yes, no matter what, yes, I may fail, but at least I'll learn how I can do better in the future. Is kind of the mindset I've maintained, and it's definitely helped, drive me forward significantly over time.
That's awesome. What I loved about what you just shared right now was probably within us, we have all these skills and things that we haven't uncovered in ourselves, but by putting yourself out there, trying to do something different and gaining those experiences by trying different things you never thought you could, you start unleashing various skills and opportunities to be able to excel at something you always maybe feared of doing even before you had that chance. One of the things that I've really appreciated about getting to know you over the last couple of years that I've gotten to know you is you take on an extra initiative at work to welcome new graduates into the workplace. And you've actually put together a program where you support these individuals. What are sort of what would you say are probably your top three takeaways that you always want a new graduate to learn from you when entering the workplace?
It's a very tough one because there's so much that they can learn. This is something I'm very passionate about, and the reason for that is because I feel like I was privileged in that I had some sort of support going into university and knowing how to navigate the unknowns in that, new space. Whereas a lot of graduate students or undergrad students do not have that opportunity, which is why they're kind of coming in to look at, what can they do to kind of grow in that space. And so for me, I feel like although I may not be the most experienced person in the room, just taking some time to share, what, this is kind of what I did, but this is what you can do to do even better.
Even better. Right.
Is very, very helpful for these students. And it'll better position them to exceed beyond where they are right now. And I really want them for them. I think it's really nice for them to be able to have that stepping stone to kind of like just learn what do people do in this situation so that they can do even better and be better prepared to tackle those challenges when the time comes. So that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy, giving back especially specifically to the U of T community,
Right.
Or even to undergrad students, high school students. I feel like there's so much that they can learn. It's just a matter of being able to feel comfortable to ask. And a lot of times students don't feel comfortable to ask because they themselves are trying to understand, what can I do?
Right.
So the top three takeaways, I would say, one, learning how to communicate, right? I think
Right.
even for myself, that's the biggest challenge I have. But you need to be able to communicate, what, this is what I think I'm good at. This is what I think I'm not as good at. These are areas that I may want to explore or may want to understand. And to be able to communicate, you need to be able to understand yourself internally, how to put those thoughts together. So that's one takeaway I would say. The next is don't be afraid to leverage your network and the people around you, right? So always network, always communicate with the folks around you, always interact with them because, no matter who it may be, there's always going to be something that they can share with you that you may potentially have never known. Whether it's just, random advice, I recently learned the Teletubbies are beyond 8 feet tall. It's useless information, but it's very helpful because things like this may come back later on and you may be able to share that with someone else, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You never know who you're going to meet through these people as well. It's a good networking opportunity. It also helps you to identify what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. So always being able to network, don't be afraid of that. And then the third is, my all-time favorite, don't be afraid of failure, right? My fear of failure is really real. I'm
Right.
very, very open about it. But at the same time, again, you need to be confident enough to overcome that fear. Take on that optimistic lens and just be able to be open to learning and trying new things because you never know where it's going to take you.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it may work out well.
All right. Well, communicate, network, fear of failure are those top three takeaways that you shared with everybody. And I agree with you. I mean, I think one of the most important things is in your first few months as a new professional that has just graduated, ask for help. I mean, people realize that this is probably brand new for yourself. And that's the most forgiving time is right at the beginning. You don't want to be doing it like making a mistake 5 years later from something simple you would have learned. So thank you for sharing those top three tips. In 2023, we are still seeing that there's a disproportionate number of women in leadership compared to males in leadership, and that still makes the efforts of women to break that ceiling very difficult. Can you discuss the gender diversity challenges that you had to overcome?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's different ways to look at this, but the way I look at it is really as two parts. One is gender diversity, so being a woman in a industry or in an area where there's a lot of male, it's a very male-dominated industry. And the second part of that is the fact that I'm a very visibly practicing Muslim. I have a scarf on my head. There are certain religious practices and cultural values that I maintain. And so figuring out what's the balance of maintaining that with the Western culture or the working culture versus my own culture that I've kind of been, trained to for so many years, trained to kind of maintain. So the balance for that is always, very difficult to strike. I think that's one thing I still continue to struggle with. But at the same time, I feel like, we're very privileged in that we live in a time and an era in which these are challenges that are recognized by most people. And there is not only one or two people that are trying to break, certain stereotype. There is a good number of folks that are kind of working towards not only breaking that stereotype, but establishing a new stereotype. And you want to be part of that change. And so, yeah, I think it's a matter of, just kind of being confident in yourself, not being scared of any failures, just kind of addressing challenges head on, leveraging the network around you, communicating, being open about, hey, these are things that I feel very strongly about. How can we change a little bit of the culture to be a bit more accommodating to some of these things? And what's really funny is that I've never encountered a situation where people have countered that or challenged that.
Yeah.
People have always been open and receptive to it. They always want to hear, what do I think, right? If I'm quiet in a room, they always ask me, Zahra, what do you think? What do you want? And not only do they just hear what I say, they actually act on it and come back to me with a plan as well. So I always feel heard. I always feel recognized. And so I'd say, like, right now, like, even professionally, that's one of the reasons why in a male-dominated industry, I'm one of the few women that are in that male-dominated industry. And you know what? It's really funny is that a lot of my team is now growing and a lot more women are coming in. And it's not just women of a specific educational background. It's women of, different colors, of different ethnicities, of religions. It's women of, different ages and different academic backgrounds and whatnot, right? They're coming in with various levels of experience. We recently hired, a lot of new grads. So a lot of that feedback has always been taken in a positive light. People are always, open to growing and learning a bit more. And what's even funnier is the fact that I've never to this day felt that I was a visibly practicing Muslim who wears a headscarf. I just felt like I was one of the few folks that came in and was part of the team naturally.
Right.
So that's never been a challenge for me, which is very interesting. But yeah, it's great.
So I want to build on this because you brought up, some real important points here. Having a seat at the table, having your voice heard. Over the course of 4 years, did you have to build your brand, or was there something you think that you did spectacularly well, or did it take a few steps here and there to get your voice heard? Can you maybe indulge us on if you did anything extra to get that sort of recognition?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest thing for me was I'm very passionate about whatever I embark on. So whether it's, work or whether it's a, side gig or an extracurricular, I take it very, very personally. And I'll make sure that I'm, my 110% focus is on that to make sure that not only am I doing what I need to do, but I'm executing and delivering beyond the expectation.
Right.
So that's been my biggest focus. So I think my work ethic speaks to it. It's shown through that opportunity there. Right. But also the networking, the mentorship, a lot of the collaboration you do with the folks that you come across or interact with in that space, right? I think that really also builds and helps you to brand yourself within the industry. So I've been very privileged in that whoever I've worked with during my time from when I first started at Sick Kids to where I've gotten now, I've always found a mentor within the people around me, whether it's a manager, whether it's,
Right.
just a regular colleague, whether it's a student who's coming in for a few weeks here and there. They always, they have something to share and impart on, right? And that's really helped tremendously. And so I think that's kind of helped me make that jump from my first job to my second job to my third to my fourth. My mentor at the time, was a very world-renowned doctor who she would always advertise my extracurriculars to the folks around me.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of where I learned, okay, you know what, you need to brand yourself.
Yeah.
This is what you need to do to establish those
Yeah.
roots in your workplace and grow. And then I got to my second role where now I had those roots, but it was a matter of figuring out how do I strengthen those roots. So I think just being passionate about what I'm doing kind of spoke to that. Being able to network, maintain, collaboration, maintain a positive spirit, help those around you, in good faith. That really that really helped to deepen those roots. And then from there, I decided to make a shift to a completely different space in the hospital, in the industry. And that was, again, I found another mentor in my manager who helped me tremendously as well. I had zero experience, but she took it on me to kind of like, she took the opportunity to raise me and teach me and whatnot and carry me forward. And, within a few months, I got promoted to a different role as a project manager, and that's really helped me, bloom. So I think over time, really just having a seat on the table, it wasn't because I was vocal about it. It was because these mentors really came back and helped me to, get that seat. And once I got that seat, I learned that, I need to be more vocal. I need to, advertise my brand, and I need to share things that I feel strongly about because people around me do respect that. And it took me time to process that, you're not just a person in the room. You're a person that people respect, which is why you're there in the first place.
Yeah.
And just having the confidence to speak and being able to know, like, what, they're not going to dismiss you.
Yeah.
That took a while to overcome. So I think all of those things combined collectively really drove that forward.
You know what? I love what you talked about. The mentors you had ended up being the champions for you to build, your reputation, your voice, your brand. I just love that. And going back to that whole idea of, be passionate about everything you do. I want to touch upon a new role that you're embarking on, which I just recently got to learn, is, although you're in the healthcare field, people can now see you and hear you on the Muslim Network television. How are you able to balance all of this out, and how did that come about as well?
I wonder the same thing every night. It's an ever learning journey. But you know what? I think it just speaks to how passionate I am about helping others, right? Whether it's through work, whether it's through my extracurriculars, I really enjoy getting involved and being able to help someone to know how can they do even better. And so for me, it's always been like, okay, you know what, you have these opportunities, you're learning through them, that's great, but what's the impact of that opportunity? And so, like I said, a lot of my extracurriculars from university, even up until now, have been very focused on like helping the community, giving back to the community, whether I was personally involved, whether I was not personally involved, whether it's in academics, whether it's in like, the Muslim community, or even in like, the local community I live in right now geographically. Right, it's always a matter of finding something or an opportunity that kind of addresses and helps those in those spaces. So the Muslim Network TV opportunity is actually something that came to me through through networking and mentorship.
Right.
A lot of networking opportunities kind of led to me understanding like, okay, there is this opportunity that exists, and there's so much potential in that. There's so much potential for growth. There's so much potential to kind of expand that, to kind of make it a bit more heard. And I think beyond that, I was very passionate about the opportunity because it was a safe space for Muslims, or specifically Muslim youth, to come and kind of rely on and share what's happening in the Muslim world in a very Western focused environment,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that was very, very interesting to me. And I felt like, okay, you know what? This is something that I want to try out. Let's just try it out and see how it works. And over time, I've learned that I enjoy it. I love it, right? Like being able to share, you know, although I'm reading the news and I'm a news anchor, but being able to share the news with a community of Muslims around you,
Yeah.
and it's not just, you know, a specific audience of a certain age group or
Yeah.
demographic. It's actually, you know, beyond that as well. There's a lot of opportunity for a lot of younger folks to get involved as well. You're making a larger impact, right, with that group. And I think just being of a certain age also helps to better resonate with this demographic as well.
I agree.
All came together in that one opportunity, and I really enjoyed it. So I think it was a good balance in that it was a nice personal growth experience, but it was also a nice experience in that I was helping the community at a larger scale than I had previously. And, you know, it's something I'm very passionate about. I absolutely love it.
You know, based on this podcast and how this turned out, I could see why you're a natural news anchor, where they had the opportunity to take on this challenge of sharing the news within your community and sharing it with the Muslim population that are here to listen to the news on a day-to-day basis. Zahra, I wanted to take a moment to thank you so much for being here today, for sharing all those wonderful experiences, teaching us a thing or two about what we could take away, especially for our listeners here today who might be currently a student, somebody who's just graduated, and those that are looking to take their next journey. So once again, on behalf of everybody here at 5 on the Go, the University of Toronto Mississauga's Career Center, Zara, thank you so much for being here and sharing what you shared with us today.
Thank
We'll
you
see
for
you soon.
having me. And again, I think for a lot of the folks who are listening, always happy to connect and help them grow. So thank you.
All right, Zara. And if people do want to connect with you, what's the best way that they can connect with you?
LinkedIn. So you
LinkedIn.
can find me on LinkedIn, Zahra Syed, and I'm happy to schedule some time to just have a coffee chat, informal chat, you know, anything to help people grow.
All right. Thank you so much, Zara.